So I might look a little weird. I've got my after-work stuff, my shirt and tie and my shooting jacket. And I normally would spend some time here after work to do a bit of training, especially now that it's daylight savings, the approaching winter, and we're losing daylight. So it's important to spend time doing something to maintain your practice routine, your arrow volume, and so on. Now, that said, I'm not shooting today. I've brought my gear out. I've got my Korean bow here, did some filming for that, a few funny skits coming up. But what I wanted to talk about in this video is, I guess, the mental and physical thresholds in which someone might have to tap out or retire from a round. This has happened to me in the weekend. So I've been out of practice. This is no secret. You wonder why my scores are so average. I spend all my time coaching or running the club and basically no time training. It gets very frustrating or aggravating at times because you need some kind of momentum. You start doing one practice session, then another practice session, and you spend 3 or 4 days a week training, and it feels good when you have that cycle going. But when you lose that cycle, when you have a break because of work or personal reasons, it's very hard to get back into, not just mentally, but physically as well. Especially when you shoot recurve, you really need to have that consistent training routine so that your body, your muscles, your joints, they are constantly building up and being conditioned for shooting for long periods of time. I've been very slack on that. Not always my fault, so I tell myself, but I'm definitely not in condition to do so. Now, on the weekend, yesterday in fact, we were shooting a FITA 1440, or a ladies FITA 1440. That is a 144 arrow round. That's at 70 meters, 60 meters, 50, and then 30. And it used to be a fairly standard round. These days, most rounds are the FITA or the World Archery 720, which is 72 arrows at 70 meters, although many clubs do a double 720, which is 144. So the same thing as before, except for 70 meters only. So most of us have to condition to shoot about 150 arrows in competition. Now, I can do 72, barely. I can do 120, barely, with enough breaks in between. 144 I should be able to do. Even with average conditioning, I shoot a 36-pound bow, so it's not a heavy load. Except that when you're trying to focus on technique, back tension, expansion, clicker, you really punish yourself when you don't do it right, and your body will feel it. So what was happening was that for the first 36 arrows, things were okay. My rest was broken and I couldn't tune my bow properly, so considering that nothing was actually calibrated, I was doing okay. Had a few misses, nothing disastrous, basically nothing worse than I normally do at 70 meters. Come to 60 meters and I was really starting to break down. And this is, long-term things like sleep deprivation, not eating properly, not training regularly, and I was starting to break down and I was really feeling it. And after an extended lunch break or late lunch break, I felt fueled up again, but the body just didn't want to go to keep shooting. I was like really getting the cramps. I felt I could still power through, but there were a few very big warning signs. And this is actually what I want to talk about today, is at what point do you quit? Now, normally when I set up rounds and I shoot with people, it's a point of pride for me to not quit. And the reason why I don't do that is it kind of looks bad. Just the disappointment or the shame of not going the distance, it's enough to drive me to commit to shooting for longer hours. And I used to love doing this. But since I haven't done it for a long time, and remember, a 144 hour round can take 4 hours. It's a really long shoot. I really wanted to stick it out. I was kind of 50-50 in the morning. Wasn't sure if I was going to commit to it, especially with the broken wrist. But once I got something jury-rigged and working, I wanted to do it. My club members were shooting as well. Our coach came up. So we had a good group going. I really didn't want to disappoint my fellow club members. But what ultimately happened was I just physically couldn't handle it. And the clue was the front shoulder. I think at some point, either because I've been overtrained during the week or my form was slipping a long distance. I was getting pain in the shoulder here, not agonizing pain. Actually, no, it wasn't pain at all. It was actually a tenseness. I felt a little tender, a little strained here. It felt very hard. It still does, actually. So I hadn't damaged anything. It wasn't painful. It wasn't like, oh, it hurt so much. But it was a warning. And the last time I had this problem was when I was shooting the State Short Range Championship a couple of years back. And I also felt the same tenderness here, and I was actually shooting very poorly. One of my worst results ever, actually. I made the distance, I finished the entire round, but it was a terrible result. But I understood why. And I felt the same sort of thing here. I felt I was really struggling to get the front shoulder down and pushing forward while expanding and kind of do the whole push-pull thing with the shoulders there. So I had the technique right, but I couldn't physically complete the shot. That was dropping. This was also, I couldn't get my arm fully pushed down straight. It was really kind of coming back in. And I guess you could say that my body was at the point of failure. The muscles were no longer able to lift or push that weight one more time. As much as you mentally will yourself to do it, you just can't do it with archery because you have to go to the clicker. Even if you remove the clicker and shoot normally, if you get plop like that, it drops like 50 meters short. So it was quite disappointing. I was taking everyone's time. We weren't timing the rounds, but if I had been timing the rounds, I'd been timed out ages ago. I really didn't want to quit. But after 2 ends at 50 meters, which is not a hard distance for me, I basically tapped out and I went, I'm sorry guys, but I'm going to retire from this round. So we counted all the misses and then we retired. And it wasn't a bad retirement. It wasn't like I'm really angry and frustrated. I have done that. When I'm not enjoying myself, I will retire from the round. No point in forcing yourself to shoot through when you're mentally in a bad space. But I was mentally in a good space, a little frustrated with my conditioning, but in a good space. It's just that I didn't want to destroy my shoulder. And that's kind of the conclusion which I'll make for this video here. How do you know when you're doing it wrong? How do you know it's time to reevaluate your form and technique or stop and do it properly before you hurt yourself? Archery shouldn't hurt. That's the big thing. When it comes to injuries and problems and people get worried about what sort of injuries will happen, it's typically shoulders, either this drawing shoulder as a right-hander or your bow shoulder if you're not dropping it down correctly. But archery should not hurt. Is there soreness? That's normal. Might be soreness in the fingers, might be soreness in your muscle, which is used for archery, but there shouldn't be pain. So if something is actually physically hurting, something is wrong, and I would actually recommend stopping because that might be some serious damage. The other sign is if something feels like it's about to hurt a lot. And what I mean by this is when you feel a load being pushed onto your shoulder and top of your rotator cuff, and it feels like if you push any further, it's going to rupture. That's the big warning sign. Stop, stop, stop. I know you might want to push yourself to finish the round or finish the shot, but the more you exert yourself, especially on vulnerable shoulders, the more likely you are to do significant damage to your shoulders. That will, of course, affect your quality of life as you have to go through rehab and recovery, but it will also affect your long-term archery career. And I just really want to caution people who are pushing themselves to shoot heavy draw weights, especially if they're not in condition to do so. If you're shooting a 40, 50, 60 plus pound bow, don't take this lightly. You will need to spend time to work up to it and then maintain it. Some people are very strong naturally and build the right muscles, that's fantastic, but don't go too high, too heavy, too soon. I've said this before and I'll say it again. You have to protect your shoulders. That's something which people severely overestimate. And again, people who haven't learned archery correctly, people with poor form of technique, they'll lift their shoulders up, they'll lean backwards, you're gonna pop your shoulder. So I felt that on the weekend. I felt that I could physically mentally force myself to do so. But each time I drew the bow back, I felt that that tension in the front shoulder, and I felt that it was going to explode on me. So I stopped. My fellow shooters understood what I was going through, not the mental part. That was completely fine, but it was that part where if I kept going, I would have hurt myself, and I felt okay with tapping out. Normally, I'm not okay with that, but having gone through this, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well, that's when I thought, yeah, it's time to call it quits. No point getting worked up now. It's only a practice round to get our fellow shooters conditioned for the competition next week. But yeah, for me, it was a sign. And I guess this video is here to remind you to take it easy on yourselves. Unless you're in a gold medal match and you have to do it to win. For most of us, we're not doing that seriously, or we're not doing it at that level. Just take it easy. There are other ways to push yourself, and you can always come back next time and do it again and do it better. So yeah, that's my advice. Take it easy. Pay attention to how your body feels. If it hurts or it's about to hurt, listen to your body. You're probably doing something that's not quite right, and pushing any further may lead to big complications later on. Anyway, this is NUSensei. Hope you found that helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.